Welcome to the 26th week after Pentecost. It is Monday, November the 18th, 2024. This is the Manna at the Tap podcast, where we actively seek the spiritual nourishment our souls crave. The daily lectionary reading we explore together is the Manna, designed to nurture our spiritual growth and provide the sustenance our souls need. I'm Gloria, your fellow traveler on this spiritual journey, and together we share insights and interpretations from these readings that enrich our spiritual lives. Today's lectionary reading is Psalm 3. These 8 verses portray King David as living a life of faith, including the highs and lows of living in a broken world. The title describes a difficult time when his son, Absalom, created a national revolt wanting to dethrone his father David. Psalm 3 expresses the many feelings of humiliation David experienced as a father and as the leader of the nation of Israel. You see, Israel was now a powerful nation on the world stage, and David had conquered the mighty nation of the Philistines. He was living in a breathtaking palace with his many wives and servants. But there had been times of difficulties in his personal life and his family life. Absalom was angry at his father for what Absalom's half-brother Ammon had done to Absalom's sister Tamar. He had raped her, and Absalom killed him and then fled into exile for several years. When he returned home, the relationship between father and son remained broken. Nothing had been resolved. As resentment built in Absalom, he offered himself to the people as a sympathetic leader wanting to dethrone his father and become the next king. Before long, though, Absalom had a following of some of the most powerful military men in David's army. David was betrayed by his son, and many of his friends abandoned him, siding with Absalom. The fabric of David's life was now unraveling. He had no choice but to flee into the wilderness from his son. Let's examine Psalm 3. It opens with David reading the propaganda leaflets that said God would not deliver him. David's heart was broken, knowing that this was not the truth. He punctuated the end of verse 2 with a Selah. My holy imagination is of David in that Selah moment, reflecting on the many times in his younger years when he was in the same wilderness running from King Saul. His enemies were now his son and those who betrayed him. But in verses 3 and 4, as he cries out to Yahweh, and Yahweh is God's personal covenant name, David will shift his mind from what his enemies are saying, and he will utter a prayer of faith. Yahweh was a shield around him and the one who would lift him out of his feelings of failure and be the one who would restore his joy. Now, this was a familiar way of praying for David. He had practiced a life of prayer from as far back as a teenager when he was out in the same wilderness tending his father's flocks. Yahweh was the one who heard and answered prayer. And David was not afraid to ask for help because he knew Yahweh was faithful. David was intentional about getting sleep in the wilderness. He was sure the Lord would protect him while he slept, and he would wake up safe and sound because the Lord would have protected him. But these words were easy to say. The reality is that anxiety had a way of creeping into the mind when he was trying to sleep. He could not forget the propaganda leaflets that said that God would not deliver him. And as those words began to creep in, David responded with his weapon of words. You arise, Yahweh, you deliver me, for you are my God. You are the one to strike all my enemies. David visualized his enemies ready to tear him apart like a wild beast would do. So he asked God to make them powerless by breaking their teeth. Praying at times can be a fierce battle in which one must continue to speak words of affirmation to oneself. In the final verse of Psalm 3, David praises Yahweh for deliverance even before there was a battle. He was not dependent on his army or his own military strategy. He was willing to acknowledge that any victory he had would come from God and God alone. So he asked for a blessing on the people because this civil war affected innocent people, causing them to take sides between David and his son Absalom. David turned this experience of betrayal and emotional pain into a song of praise. He ended the psalm with another Selah, another pause. Deliverance comes from Yahweh. No matter what happens in our lives, God can be trusted. We can experience the peace of God that surpasses our understanding. And when the prayer hearing God becomes the prayer answering God, we can praise Him, we will receive joy, and the people will receive a blessing.